Nomad Podcast.
Okay, a little bit of a curveball today. For our 10th episode, double digits, I am not interviewing anyone. I wanted to do something special. I was intending to do what's called an AMA, an Ask Me Anything, where I invite all my previous guests, and we're going to get everyone on the phone and do a live Ask Me Anything. And long story short, this isn't going to be possible to pull off and still maintain the pace that I want to keep of the one episode per week. But instead of that, as luck would have it, there's another podcaster in Lisbon right now. So I was able to meet up with her, and we're going to turn the tables. She is interviewing me on my own show. So Laura Gallaher of Expand Your Edge, very accomplished podcaster. We actually interviewed one of the same people, Matt Dunsmore, who was my guest on episode 5. She's interviewed. So that's what we're doing. In this conversation, we talk a little bit about my motivation for becoming a nomad. I did remote year from May 2016 to 2017. So we talk about kind of the circumstances that led me to do it, what I took from it, why I didn't go back to the US and continued to travel and eventually settle in Lisbon. We talk a little bit about what it means to be a tribe. I think there's some interesting parallels actually thinking about what this means, and there's some lessons there. So talk about that. We talked about some of what contributed to the success that I had while on remote year. I was able to realize a 70% year over year revenue increase for my company. And so we dig into, try to deconstruct what contributed to that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that we touch on in this interview. It was very interesting being on the other side of the interviewing table, but I hope you enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is Laura Gallagher's interview of me. Nomad Podcast is supported in part by Nomad Prep, an online academy that teaches you everything you need to know to take your job on the road and crush it abroad. Enroll today at nomadprep.com/podcast and get your first 4 days of training completely free. Nomad Prep, take your job on the road and take on the world. So I will start off. So we're doing something a little different today. Wanted to celebrate the 10th episode, just hit double digits, and this only happens once. So for this episode, I was originally intending to do an AMA with all previous 9 guests. And my vision there was to do like Brady Bunch style grid, 9 people. Realized that that's going to take too much effort. It's not going to happen. I want to keep the pace of one a week if we can. And so Laura has graciously agreed to try a different twist on this. She has a podcast of her own. She's going to interview me on my podcast. I'm going to be my 10th guest. We're just going to see how this goes. And let's just see what happens. It's good.
Perfect. I love it. So thank you, Sean, for the opportunity to interview you on your show. I mean, I have to imagine that anybody that's following this so far has been really curious to hear more of your experiences. So I think it's going to be a great episode.
All right, let's try it.
All right, cool. Well, so I would love to hear the story of what was happening for you when you discovered remote year and decided to do the journey.
Definitely. So I came about it in a really weird way. So I was living in Phoenix at the time.
Phoenix.
Yeah. You're AZ as well.
Too, so.
Awesome.
Cool. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the small coincidences abound. So a buddy of mine, Chris Peliquin, was living, he was a neighbor of mine, lived a block away, and he had been accepted, and he didn't have a remote job at the time. So he basically came over to my place one night and just asked me, he says, "Hey, look, I know you got a remote job. How do you do it?" He was working in a family business, and so he was just curious, like, can I actually do this thing? So he was looking to me for advice on how I did my job for Pagely remotely. But in the course of me giving him that advice, he's describing this program. And the more he talks about it, the more I was just like, man, I am so jealous. Like, I want to do this thing. And then like really to back up before that, I had actually investigated, I was interested in doing a working road trip around the US. So I looked into what's involved. I wanted to go connect with a bunch of people I hadn't seen in a while. But the deeper I got into looking at that, like the overhead associated with planning the next route and driving and then trying to work during the day, it just didn't at all seem feasible for me to actually do that road trip and still be productive for Pagely. So I kind of had written that off. But then about the time that I had just shelved that idea and said, okay, I guess I'll just keep working remotely, Chris starts describing this thing, and the more I heard it, the more I realized, like, holy crap, like this is that. It's solving all the problems that precluded me from doing that, but it's a global scale. You guys are like going all around the world. This is amazing.
So what do you remember? Like, was there a moment or something in particular that he was describing about the remote year program that made you realize, like, wait, this sounds kind of awesome, and kind of took the turn?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, well, and again, the emphasis wasn't even on that. It was on like, well, how do I do my job remotely, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, okay, well, so what's the situation? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then, yeah, I mean, it was just basically, oh, I got accepted this thing and we're going to go all over the world. And they're like handling all the travel and like, we get to see the world. And so it's like I just was like slackjaw as he's describing this. I'm like, he was asking me if he thought he should, like, if he thought I can't even talk, if I thought he should do it. And so I said, look, A, you should absolutely do it. And B, I'm going to do it with you.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I applied that night. And then it was pretty close to the time when we were leaving. I think this was about March-ish, like late March. And so, yeah, so I applied, didn't hear back for a few weeks, and then actually got in. And it was just like this. I had a month to prepare. So it was just like off to the races. It was one of these things we were talking today. It was like, basically, I went from like, oh no, what if I don't get in, to, oh crap, I got in. Like, I got to do this now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then you go on the journey. Can you say more about what you were hoping to gain or possibly escape in doing this journey in the first place?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's escape so much as gain. So I set out to do it because I was in a bit of a rut. Like, I was working out of my apartment. It was pretty grueling hours at the time. When I look back on it now, like, I was doing a lot of different jobs. It was in the early days. I think I was employee number 8 at Pagely. And I was working really long hours out of my apartment. I was having to like force myself to go to coffee shops, just to get out and have some human interaction during the day. And so it was like, travel kind of represented this idea of like, well, I've got this remote job. I'm not really taking advantage of it. I'm just working out of my apartment and then like going to a coffee shop. Why, like, now that I know about this program, I'd be foolish not to just be doing this from around the world. Why would I not? So, I mean, that was the logic for me. It was just like, once I knew this thing existed, like, holy crap, how could you not take advantage of your situation and work from around the world? I don't know.
And so I imagine that your experience was also a little bit different than some other people because you participated with somebody that you knew beforehand, right? Your friend Chris?
Yeah. Funny story. So I guess there was 2 couples, and obviously they knew each other, but we were, I think, originally treated as a couple. It's like logistically or something. Now we're not a couple.
Important point to clarify.
Yeah, no. And then I know there was a guy, Scott, in our group that when he found out that we knew each other, it was a few months into it. And he was just he felt so betrayed. He's like, oh man, you guys know each other? Like, that's not how this works.
It's like, it's not fair.
Yeah.
Like a head start or something.
Yeah. No, but it was great. I mean, it was really cool. Early on, I felt like Chris and I, because we had history and it was like, we already knew each other. It was just like, I felt like it was very easy for us to go out and people kind of gelled around us, I felt. I mean, obviously a few months into it, we all knew each other. And so it was no issue, but like early days, no one knew anyone, but Chris and I knew each other. And so it was like this easy, like, I don't know, wingman setup or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, so what else can you tell me then about like the community and that experience?
Yeah. So Darien, I think every group feels this way, right? Like, everyone's going to say, oh, our group's the best. But like, I really think we had a special group of people, truly. Like, if our farewell party is anything, I think we had like 26 staff in Buenos Aires when our program concluded, right? So there was a magic amongst our group that I've seen it in a little bit, like in a few groups since then, like Sisu and the group that's in town now, Tierney has it. Certain groups have this, I don't know, this essence of like generosity and people having each other's back and like really truly they get it. Like, to me, the remote year experience is all about like just stepping out of your comfort zone, like trying things you would never try, just being very generous with your time, like trying some new food, trying some new language, like running a seminar on something that you know how to do. And just like, it is this platform, like in the last interview with Greg, it truly is like something that you can use to launch a side business or to just go try some new thing that you didn't know. So yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling at this point, but yeah. What was the question
So
again?
I love that. And I completely agree with all of that based on my 7-8 months of experience now. But I would love to hear from you, like, what was a personal experience or situation where the value of like this community and tribe really sunk in for you?
And, okay, interesting. And we talked about today about pausing and reflecting and just thinking about that.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, I can tell you one thing where I don't know. This is weird. I don't know why this comes to mind. There was a lady in our group, Nancy, uh, and this was like the first instance that I remember. It was in Prague, so it was in our month one. It was the first instance that it really like resonated, and I felt it. And I was like, oh wow, like this is what this is all about. Basically, we were staying in a place. It was called Belgicka, which means Belgium in Czech. And so it was like this big kind of hotel dorm setup. A lot of people were staying there, and apparently someone was crying. And Nancy had a room adjacent to someone and heard it. And she jumps on Slack and just says, like, hey, just want to let you know, like, whoever's crying, like, I'm here for you. Like, you know, come see me, like, reach out. This is what this is all about. And like, no judgment, like, I'm here for you. And like that action to me epitomized the essence of that. I guess another one that jumps to mind, there's a guy in our group, Jeremy. He probably won't even remember this. If I have the photo, I'll dig it up. But like, I came into Belgrade, which was month 2, and it was late one night. I come into the workspace, and he's there after hours working with someone in our group, teaching Excel, like staying after. You know, like, I don't think anyone truly knew each other that well at this point, but he's clearly just like doing what he can to help someone else with what was clearly a frustrating Excel, like VLOOKUP, one of those funky things that you always have to look up every time you do it. But like that to me was like the real magic of remote year, is that something like going into it, I had only seen it as like, this is solving the logistic problem that prevented me from driving around the US and traveling on my own. I saw it as that. But once I got into it, I realized, no, this is like, that was the sugar coating that got us all to do it. But now that we're here, it's fully the community. It's 98% the community once you're on it. And I mean, I think you're nodding. I think you would agree. You know, that's what it is.
I absolutely would agree. And I, as you said, I have my own podcast too. And so the other similarity that we have is that I'm here with Kayla, who I knew beforehand. So when we talked about this on our podcast, I said, this is before it even started, that I was looking forward to the community aspect of the remote year experience just as much, if not more, than the travel. And you brought up a word earlier in our conversation about, you know, tribe. And I've used that same word because I feel like it's just so compelling. And I think it's natural for us. I mean, that's how we used to be as humans. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
to have this like nomadic experience with a tribe is really cool and very different than how a lot of people live today.
So I think in the same way, I've noticed, like, if you've ever sat around a campfire and like everyone's just transfixed by the fire, and there's just something like, I think, hardwired in our brains, in our primal limbic human brains, as we sit around a campfire, that maybe like it's awakening some primal memories of like, oh, here's warmth, here's fire, and like we're all transfixed by it. I think there is like some tribal imprint of the way that people used to live, maybe. And like remote year is the closest thing. And, you know, other travel programs, not to like say that only remote year has this, like Wi-Fi Tribe and the other ones that are out there, like moving as a group of people, I think is how we were hardwired to approach the world. And I think getting back to that touched on some primal thing and it restored it. And maybe that's the thing that kind of rejuvenated. Like I've tried so many times to figure out what was it that revitalized me, or what is it about this experience that really like reawakened me. And like that is what I keep coming back to, is like, is that the thing? Like, or is it just traveling again as like a modern tribe? Yeah, I don't know. Like it's a hypothesis, but yeah, I think maybe that is what it is.
I love that. And So I think that your listeners maybe already know this about you, but you're not still traveling around quite in the same nomadic pace that you did with remote year, but you also didn't integrate back into the United States. Do your listeners already know this, or do you want to share some of the decision making
Sure.
around that?
I don't know. I mean, this is all one big experiment, so I don't even know, aside from like my mom and like some friends, who's listening to this thing at this point. So,
Hi, Sean's mom.
so yeah. So for people that don't know, here's my situation. Like I finished remote year. Our group concluded in Buenos Aires in May of 2017. I made my way back up south in Central America through various countries. Went back for a wedding. Our old drummer got married, so we went back, did that, and then I bounced right back out to Portugal because Lisbon was the place that really spoke to me. Like I love this city. It's on remote year. It was month 4, and I just remember every day I woke up, I was so happy to be here, so stoked about it. So I want to come back and like validate, okay, was that just a honeymoon phase? Was that remote year? Like, was it because it was bookended by London and Morocco, which were 2 like of the most difficult months for me? Like, so I really just wanted to get at that question, like, do I truly love this place, or was that just a honeymoon phase? And so I came back and sure enough validated it and just like, yeah, I really love it and I want to move here. So I started the immigration process. Fast forward anyways, went back, posted up in Mexico until my visa came through, and then officially moved here in February earlier this year and got residency in May. And yeah, I've been here since February and I can stay here now that I have a residency.
That's really cool. So, and I would imagine that there are people who, if they're not interested now, would be interested in the future to know more about that whole process, of getting the visa and everything. But yeah, do you want to save that, or would you want to talk about any of that experience?
I can touch on it. Yeah. I mean, it was not hard in the sense that like it was super like a high bar to jump over, but it was a lot of little low bars. Basically, it was annoying, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Annoying but doable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's just a lot of dysfunction, for lack of a better word. There's just broken parts of the process. You'll find yourself in a catch-22 that you need this form to get to see that person, but that person requires that you have this form. And so there's a lot of that and just brokenness. So I used a company called Move In. I believe, I don't know if they're specific to Portugal or if they do it elsewhere, but they made the process a lot simpler. Worked with an attorney from there. And yeah, I've got a Trello board. I've given it to a number of people who have asked me, like, how did you do this? I probably need to change that because it's got like all my ID numbers and everything sensitive in there. So at some point,
a little revealing.
Yeah. I need to, well, I'll do like a redacted version of that Trello board for the people that are interested. But yeah, it's all doable. It's just, I think start to finish, it took 10 months and, I'm happy that it's done. I'm happy I don't have to wait in another Portuguese line for a Portuguese document, but yeah, it's very doable.
Awesome. So tell me about your experience now still being here in Lisbon. So obviously your cohort, Darien, ended a while ago, and how you balance sort of this ongoing feeling of tribe that exists with remote year with this idea of not getting too in a bubble.
Yeah. This is a great question. So remote year, when we say bubble, just for the people that don't know what we're referring to, remote year can be a bubble that you never leave. It's very much, I called it an aircraft carrier. Like when we were traveling, I liken it to like you're traveling on this very big, safe ship that's like going around the world. And then you can choose to do these little side trips and adventure out and whatnot, but you always can come back to this place of safety, right? So the bubble is traveling with you at that point. Now that I live in Lisbon, there's a group, like remote year has a very strong presence here. I work out of the workspace. That's where these calls are filmed. So there's always a group in town, like 11 out of 12 months here. And so it's now this revolving door. I guess like the analogy is like before I was the water flowing through the stream, right? And I'm flowing through all these cool places. Now it's like I'm the rock in the stream and there's all this cool water flowing past me. So it can be, it's awesome. It's amazing. First of all, I'm so lucky to have this position that I do. But it's also exhausting in the sense that, yeah, like you meet 40 new people every month and then they're gone the next month. And, I'll see some of them again and it's cool. We have the Remote Nation Slack to stay in touch. It's cool for that. But it's also like, yeah, there's I just remember, for instance, when Sisu left, I was definitely like mildly depressed. I really connected with that group. And to have like, it felt like that all those feelings of our own group, like of closeness and tribalness, to develop that so quickly and then have them just like leave, which I knew was coming, like that was a tough thing. So, yeah, it is an interesting position to be in. I've definitely noticed that since then, I've decidedly tried to make more local ties and remain only so connected to a group. Y'all's group is awesome. Like you have that same feeling, same like inclusiveness and welcomingness that they did. And so it's tough not to want to hang out with you guys all the time.
And our Family Feud.
Yeah, Family Feud was amazing.
That was pretty epic.
We'll post a clip of Family Feud. that was pretty great.
That was really fun.
Question is, which RY city is most likely to get food poisoning? Marissa?
That city is obviously Hanoi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so when did you become aware of this whole idea of the bubble, like even if it was still during Darien, and how did you build the courage to step out, or are you still working on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I was going to give myself one bit of advice, I don't think I did that particularly well. Like, I really enjoyed our group. We had such a close group, and we were in all these amazing places. Remote Year has this thing called tracks where they try to get you out of the bubble. They connect you with a local lady who makes empanadas in Cordoba, and you go into her kitchen and then you make empanadas. Like, so stuff like that, they already have it baked into the program to do that. But I do believe that or the advice that I would give to my former self if I was going into Remote Year would be, beyond that, take it upon yourself to like go to local meetups, use something like Internations or whatever the local app is like that. There's a platform called Eat With that's great for connecting you to go have dinner with locals. Like, do things to decidedly put yourself outside of the Remote Year bubble. Because even though it is a track event with a local, it's still Remote Year people. You're still surrounded with a bunch of people you know. So that would be, yeah.
Okay. So great advice for anybody who chooses to use Remote Year specifically as a platform.
Yeah. Just allocate a few days a month where you're like not even going to do anything Remote Year related. You're going to go off on your own. We had a guy, Bacher, in our group who was very good. He did like half of his time was spent towards the end just wandering on his own. And I don't know the right mix. I think everyone kind of has to calibrate that on their own, but that would be my advice, is like definitely get out on your own beyond the group.
And so whether it's with Remote Year or a different travel company or people just venturing out on their own, you definitely have a passion now for helping people create that experience for themselves. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I mean, well, clearly we're this. I've done quite a bit of, like, most of my spare time at this point is consumed by the different initiatives that you know about. So this podcast is the latest one. The Nomad prep course. I mean, this all kind of started because, I heard a bunch of conversations from the PAs in Mexico City when I was living there. And it's like all these people they would talk to, like, they were the wrong people and they're asking like all the same questions. And it's like, how can I make this better? How can I make it so, folks can solve the logistical problems, get excited, get inspired to want to do this. It's not even so much about like factual knowledge, because you can go look a bunch of this stuff up online. But I think it's really more about like hearing the right stories, hearing about what's possible, getting psyched to do it, and then just pulling the trigger and being like, what do I have to lose? So I built that e-course in December. And spent some more time gamifying it and making it really, like the tool that I wanted, like this interactive checklist and all sorts of stuff. And so I built the thing that I thought was missing in terms of an onboarding process when I did Remote Year. They have put more energy around that, although I would say it's still like, I built what I think they need. So anyways, we'll leave it at that. And then once I had invested all the energy and built that, then it was just one of those very like low fanfare launches, and like, okay, like nobody's doing this now. And I just put all this energy into this. Okay, well, so if the mission is to get more people, give them the courage to do it, so then what else can I do to promote the course? And the podcast just became a natural extension of, okay, like I could see myself interviewing a bunch of people. I'm endlessly fascinated about all these different subjects, of what makes someone a good nomad. Like why do people not do this? What are the blockers there? What can I help do? Is there maybe some completely weird thing that we haven't even thought of that's going to be the answer for like a lot more people doing this? Maybe like a benefactor sponsor kind of model where like, okay, if it's truly, funds or financial, maybe there's some way to like solve that, or, getting access to remote work. So all these questions around like, why don't more people do this? Yeah, I just kind of like took it upon myself to be like, okay, let me make that my mission to help more people do this. Just because I found it to be like such a transformational experience. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you maybe say more about that, right? Like, why do you have the passion that you have for helping people on this kind of journey?
I think it's just wanting to share what it did for me, like knowing the rut that I was in and knowing how close, like on the fence I was to not doing it. It was literally like once I got accepted, it's like, oh crap, like I have to go like sell all my stuff. I have to sell my car. I have to get immunizations. I have to go da-da-da. There's like 1,000 reasons why, oh man, like I don't know if I am going to do this after all. There's a lot of like inertia keeping me in one place. But then, fortunately I did it. And I can't imagine my life right now had I not done it, is really the thing. So, I mean, in the piece, I don't know if you read the piece that I wrote on my blog, but it was like, I read something in the New York Times that was talking about lost Einsteins. And that is just like, it gave me goosebumps because like, that is what I think is going on. And a lot of people, I think people are just like stuck in roles and stuck in a place where they've layered on like all these reasons why they can't change. But like, what if, like those folks could be the ones that are the next Einstein, and they get inspired on the road and they contribute and they solve some weird malady because of the inspiration they had from traveling. I just feel like this could be the thing that unlocks so many people. And so like, when I look in the grand scheme of things, is like, in terms of what can I contribute, I feel like this could be like towards my greater mission of getting people unstuck. I think this is a really good method for helping others get unstuck. And this may not be the only method, but like it certainly did for me. So like, this is a logical place to start.
So it sounds like because you were able to get over the hump of some of those difficult tasks, I guess I want to call them, because I remember that same feeling of overwhelm. So,
and they weren't even difficult, right? They're like,
it's just quantity,
and it's just like build up in your mind, like and then like just this intangible kind of weight. You're just like but it's not difficult. It was just a lot of.
I mean, mine was a total shit show, as I was telling you earlier today. I just begging people to come to my condo and take stuff away, like just come take my stuff. But yeah, no. So I wanted to, on a more serious note, like you were able to get yourself out of the rut because your friend presented this opportunity for you. And it sounds to me like what kind of shook loose for you in terms of your mindset and the way that you show up in the world is this additional source of inspiration of realizing that like you can be the catalyst for other people. Is there anything else that you think from a place of mindset or headspace that's really shifted big time for you from having done this experience?
Here's me pausing thoughtfully because I really want to think about the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know that fundamentally anything about my view of the world changed necessarily. I think constantly being faced with a lot of little challenges is just, I really think there is something to that maybe cognitively it jogs us like just enough. I mean, there's got to be research about this. I'm just completely speculating here, but like constantly being stimulated in novel ways that we don't even think about. And I think like the examples that I've used are like the way toilets work or doors work, or just little things that you never think of being different, right? Like you just use the American way that all things work. And then you go somewhere and you're like, oh, wow, I guess, yeah, lights work differently. Like Serbia, there's light switches to turn on light switches. Like, okay, why did I do that? Like, but
I know
being stimulated in that way though, it's just enough little weird stimulation that makes you creative, I think. And it just wakes you up in a weird way. I don't know. I don't have
I love that. I think
Yeah.
that's great. I know. I think it took me until month 7 to remember that, oh, probably have to find a switch to get my washing machine to work. Like little things.
Yeah.
You said something else that sparked a thought for me, which is just a small little metaphor example, right, of a baby chick that's just hatching out of its egg. If you ever watched that experience, which I've never done live, but it's struggling. Like it is difficult and it's hard and it looks weak and fragile and it's trying so hard to like bust out of that eggshell. But it needs that experience to gain the strength to be in the world. And
Yeah.
so when I hear you talk about that, like the little challenges and how it can just unlock creativity or help us, experience things a little bit differently, that's what it made me think of.
Well, that's a perfect analogy. I mean, that eggshell, to me, we get through time as adults. I feel like there is an eggshell that develops around each of us, and we can become a little blind to it, and we go through life and it's there. But then like it takes something like this, like a drastic change and being challenged with little things that we never think about, to crack away that eggshell and realize like, oh yeah, I was living in an eggshell the last few years, right? Like I was in a rut. I just don't know any other way to put it. So yeah, I don't know.
Awesome. And so what would you say to somebody who is considering this but doesn't necessarily think that they're in a rut? They're just curious about the experience.
Well, I mean, yeah, my experience is not going to be your experience, and nor should we try to think that it should be. This is just where I came from. I think it can help a lot of people for different reasons. I think that just exposure to other cultures, I think this is the way that we dispel a lot of like stereotypes and just hatred and misunderstanding and all that stuff. Like there's no media sure is not going to do it. That's like going the wrong direction. There is no better way than going to the other side of the world and eating with someone from a different culture that I can think of, to have that one-on-one conversation that just completely opens doors for both people, right? It's a two-way street. It's not just you like as a spectator. Like you got to realize that like you're leaving these footprints all around the world in ways that you could not even fathom. There's people in Morocco now that have a different vision of what Americans really are. Like we know that for a fact. Like people came to our Valencia farewell from Morocco because we made such an impact on them. Like, so it's just like we're crisscrossing the globe and leaving all these traces, and it's just like I can find no downside of this whole thing, really. Like there's everyone should try this in the same way that I think every college student should do an exchange program, right? I did an exchange program to Ecuador that was hugely influential on me and shaped my view of the world. So I just like, I don't see an issue why more people wouldn't want to do this. And I hope more employers will embrace this. I know that there's some resistance right now in employers, and I just hope it does get to the point. Greg was saying, like, or I was saying, or Greg was saying, it was in that interview with Greg, we're talking about like the sea change that will happen once enough dominoes fall and enough employers are pushed. But it'll be a good thing because then they'll be forced to adopt this, and then I think it'll become much more acceptable. I think that'll happen very quickly, and I, for one, can't wait for that day. I think it'll be great.
And for you personally, if you could, with your own personal evidence, dispel, I think, one of the myths of letting an employee go do this experience, what would you say about your ability to achieve results for your company while you were traveling?
It worked really well for me. I don't know. We've tried to unravel that and attribute why that was the case. I think, I worked really hard. I think people in my group would attest that I was, last one at the workspace a lot of times. But I think we just had the right mix. Like, I love my company. I love what we're doing. I love the fact they had the trust in me to go do this thing. And so I feel indebted to them to make sure it works. But also, I think there was some other weird things like, the time zone overlap issue turned out to be kind of a blessing in disguise. I think like being 8 hours offset in Belgrade and having very minimal time overlap where we had to be really efficient with how we did meetings was actually a good thing. It forced the issue also. I was doing a number of roles going into this, and I think it made it very clear that, oh yeah, no, it's time to hire for some of these. So, it made that easier. It let me be more strategic. It gave me kind of white space in the day to be able to do things that weren't just so reactive. I had the mornings, like my inbox didn't start filling up until 2 in the afternoon. So I had the mornings to either go like get rejuvenated and explore the city, or work on a project, or be very strategic and say, okay, I'm going to pick this thing that's slowing us down, and how can I tackle that and go do that.
And tell me about the biggest deal that you closed in company history. Where did that happen, and how did that go down?
I'll dig up the picture. Yeah, I'll overlay it when I'm doing this. We were in Morocco. I can't disclose the client, unfortunately. We do have an NDA, but it's a very large university. It was the biggest deal to date for Pagely. And yeah, it closed in a bowling alley in Morocco. And,
so great.
And I will never forget, because the girl, Rhonda, who was like organizing the event, threw on the song, All I Do Is Win. And I had like the laptop there. I'm like, we have a picture where I'm like showing the PO that just came through, the signed PO for this massive deal. And it's like, all I do is win. No matter what. And it was just like, yeah, it was such a high point. And like, my boss tweeted out like something like, when your director of sales has his best sales month ever, and he's a digital nomad in Morocco nonetheless, and it was just such a surreal feeling. I don't know.
Did you go bowl a strike right after that too?
No, I wish I could say I did. I think I probably pulled a gutter ball. But
it didn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it's cool to have such a really tangible example of incredible success while traveling around. I think more employers can benefit from hearing that.
I mean, I hope so. I hope it's so the resistance when they shoot it down because they think that people aren't going to perform, or they're just like, they don't see this working. To me, it speaks to a trust issue that exists. And so if your employer is doing that, like my advice to the folks where they do get shut down, we had a couple people in our group who just forced the issue. They're like, look, I'm going to do this. Like, if you don't want to allow this, I'm doing it. Like, so I guess we need to part ways. I think if you have the luxury of being in a situation where you have a little leverage and you can throw that out there, that's a good tactic. And I think employers are more and more going to need to be okay with this, at least on some term, maybe not for a full year, but on some basis, they're going to need to allow more employees to travel and work this way, just because it has so many benefits. And it really does. Like, if you don't allow it, then that trust issue exists regardless. And so that should force the issue, and it should make you realize, well, screw, like, okay, my employer doesn't trust me. I should probably be thinking about finding another place to work at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know I could keep asking you questions. We could probably talk for hours and hours, but I would love to just, I guess, give you one last opportunity where you're the one being interviewed for any final thoughts that you'd really like to share.
Yeah. I mean, the cliche thing is, just do it, like the Nike phrase, right? I'm not going to say just do it, because I know not everyone's situation permits this. I know there's a lot of people now, I know, like families who are asking, like, how do I take my family on the road? Is there a family for like a remote year for families? To my knowledge, that doesn't yet exist, but it should. Like, so maybe someone listening, go build that, because we need it. But like, if your situation permits this and you're just fabricating reasons why you don't go, like, I really encourage you to think about this thing. I put it in the notes, the pre-interview questions, but there's this regret minimization framework theory of decision making, where it's essentially saying, like, what are you going to regret more on your deathbed? Are you going to regret like having tried it and maybe it failed and you came home? Probably not. Are you going to regret having always wondered what if and never tried it? Probably. That's probably the thing you're going to regret. So don't do that. So
yeah. I like that a lot. Awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much for being on your show today.
Thank me for, or whatever. Thank you for.
It's been great.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. No, but seriously, thank you for doing this. I know this is like late at night and we just dreamed this up today. So
Yeah,
I do
no, my
appreciate
pleasure.
you.
It was fun.
All right.
We'll see you in a second out there.
I'll see you. Yeah, I guess we should. Oh, yeah. Hi. All right. Yeah.
Are you coming?
Where you at? Oh, yeah. So are you just going to like
Like
create?
the infinite.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Bye.
All right, that was my conversation with Laura. Hope you found it useful, and I hope you found that interesting. It was certainly interesting from my perspective to be on the other side of the interview table. So at this point, usually I go through a script, and I'm going to break from that script today and actually just talk kind of free form off the cuff about what's coming down the pipeline here. So this whole effort has really been one big experiment, and we've got 10 episodes recorded now. I'm excited about that. Not many podcasts actually make it to 10 episodes, but there's quite a bit of time involved in producing each one of them. I spent about 6 hours with the video and making the show notes and transcriptions and photos and yada, 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 all that. So I am, after the next couple, I've got 3 more in the can. I've recorded one with a Mayo Clinic sleep specialist. I've also talked with the founder of a site which is essentially like the Yelp review system of remote job seeking sites. So it's a way to help you maximize your efficiency in terms of finding remote work. And I've also talked recently with a nutritionist, certified nutritionist and health coach who also traveled on remote year. So all 3 interesting conversations. I will be releasing those 3 episodes, and then we'll likely take a little bit of a break. I'll pause the content production and I'm going to shift my emphasis a bit. So I'm going to be focused on a couple things. I'm going to reassess this format and see if the 6 hours that's involved in each episode is justified, and if it makes sense to continue doing that, or if there's maybe some other format that makes more sense. Certainly if this was audio only, that would be a lot easier, but I do like the video. And so I'm genuinely curious, if you're listening to this, I'm very curious of how you consume this content. I see the stats, I see which platforms are being used and how many YouTube views there are and all that. But I'm genuinely curious if you find value in the video component. If you want me to continue doing the video, if it's worth it to people, I will invest that time. If nobody really needs the video, I may switch gears and do audio only going forward. So just being upfront about that. I'm also going to take the time to take some of this great content that we've had recently and integrate it into the e-course. So as some of you, or hopefully all of you know by now, I spent a good deal of time actually building an e-course, the Nomad Prep that we mentioned on today's episode. I put a fair amount of time into developing what I think is the perfect system for prepping someone to go on the road, not just for remote year. I know we spend a lot of time talking to remote year people just because that's the program that I did, but this is a tool that can be used by anyone for any program, even for solo travel. And so I want to look at that and do a better job and integrate some of these podcast episodes, go back and revisit that course and start to integrate some of this content back into there, put it in the emails that help people, pull them back into the system and get them doing it. So again, going to pause content production, focus on those things. I'm also going to, if I do continue doing video, then I want to put some emphasis into streamlining the content production process. Because it does take quite a bit of time right now. And so, and I want to keep doing these. I really enjoy these, but I also want to make the most of my time and see if I can whittle that down a bit. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm also going to put some emphasis around promotion. So we actually have a pretty good body of content. If you've listened to all 10 episodes, then thank you, and hopefully you would agree that these are some high quality interviews that we have here. So that's what's up with me. I am just wanted to give you that heads up that 3 episodes from now, we'll do a little break. And I don't know, it may be a week, it may be a month, maybe 2 months. I don't know. It's going to be as long as it takes me to kind of rejigger some of these other things. And then I've got plenty of other awesome guests lined up. I mean, the good news is that we're having no shortage of really smart people applying to be guests. And so now it's a question of, I want to keep that quality high and I want to keep the time commitment within reason. So that's where things are at. All that being said, thank you so much for listening. As always, If you want to sign up, you can put your email in the footer of the site to get notified, get access of these special events that we're going to be doing. Subscribe on any of the platforms. Try the e-course if you're thinking about going remote. All these things. Get discounts for the programs. We've got, I think, a good thing going here, but I would love to hear from you and get some feedback. Very little chatter, very few comments so far. And so it would be great just to hear a shout out and say, hey, we like what you're doing. We think it sucks, XYZ, whatever you want to say. We'd love to hear from some of the people that have been listening that we've not heard from. Okay? So until next time, there's a big world out there. I will see you on the road.
Nomad.